While I have been working on the Cyanotype video series, I have been experimenting with toning. I have toned with both coffee and tea, and the experiment that I tested out with again is with jasmine tea. Toning is usually done as a last step, but I was curious to know if I did it as a first step. These are two sheets that I toned on Monday. One is Fabriano's cold press paper and one is hot press. I use 7 tea bags of tea in 1500 milliliters of water. I put the tea bags in even before the water starts to get warm, and I let the water get to a point where it's just about to boil. Once I see that it's just about to boil, I'll turn the stove off, remove it off the burner, and I'll let it cool. After the 2 hours of toning, I didn't rinse out the paper. I hung them up to dry right away. And I didn't want to rinse them out because I was not sure of how much of the tea would rinse out in the water. I also waited 4 days before I sensitized the paper. Maybe 4 days is a little bit far-fetched, but I wanted to be sure that the paper absorbed the staining of the tea well. And here is a sheet here. This is cold press. So what I did is that I toned the paper first. One thing I noticed is after I sensitized the first paper, I found it a little bit difficult to sensitize the second paper. For some reason or another, it seemed as if the solution thickened, and trying to do nice even strokes was kind of difficult. I'm not too sure what happened there, and so as you can see, the cold press paper displayed there, it's very unevenly painted. This is another thing to think about. Maybe you'd have to use a separate brush each time, or maybe to rinse in between. Mind you, brushing with a moist brush, I'm not too sure if I'd want to do that, but then again, it might end up bringing out something interesting. But it's something that I will be repeating again, so I'm gonna see if I get the same issue. So I had sensitized this paper just about 2 hours ago, but I had toned this paper about 4 days ago, and then I let it sit in the drawer for 4 days. And now today I am going to see what happens with the cyanotype. I'm about to expose this. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. It's still quite dark because it's wet, so maybe we might see something, but it's kind of cool because I am getting a different tone. Once it dries, I'll share the result. So here is one of them. It's quite dark. I think I'm gonna put it back into the water bath just to see if maybe it might help bring out more of the highlights. But it's pretty cool. So this is the print after it's dried. I I have a light on it because it's really, really dark. You cannot see much detail. But I think I might know how to deal with this. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I'm going to give it a shot and I'll come right back. Just going to let it get a little bit wet. Just a little bit. I'm also not too sure doing it this way, you know, over time I'm sure it probably will fade out. And I would hope not, but I think that's probably what might happen. It might fade over time. I'm not sure how quickly that would happen, or maybe it might not. So I'm just making it a little bit wet here, and then we're going to just dip it in this bath of bleach. A very, very low dilution, so I could watch to see what's happening, and so it doesn't go too fast that I'll lose sight and maybe it'll bleach it completely off. Okay, almost done here. Just want to make sure it's wet. So here is my bucket. I have 1500 milliliters of water. I put my 1/8 teaspoon and stirred it up. This is pretty handy to get dollar store once again. And what I did is I marked the different amounts of water. So when I'm working with different trays, I know exactly what to fill it up to, instead of always wondering, okay, how much is how much. Especially when I'm trying something new, I like to really make sure my numbers are specific and it's just not all over the place, so then I can get something consistent, you know, over time, and then start to tweak it a little bit. I am going to pour this in here. Okay, I'm nervous now. I really don't know what's going to happen, so I am just going to like dip this in really quick. You got to really watch the print. I'm not sure if the cyanotype will just blow off and then after nothing will come back. If the cyanotype will just, you know, bleach out and then I'll have nothing left. So here we go, and in. Yeah, yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Alright, so I'm going to pull it out now. I can see some of it bleach coming out in the water. And it's opened up quite a bit. Oh yeah, it has. So 30 seconds here. I'm going to dip it into the water so it'll stop. And look at that, it's opened it quite nicely. Woohoo! This is definitely fun. Okay. So what have I learned from this experience, and what would I do differently? First of all, I am working with an old digital negative, which I would assume would have to be tweaked if I was to do this again with the same negative. The image that I have has a lot more darker areas than lighter areas. So this is something that I would think about if I was to plan to do this over again. Another thing that I'm thinking about is maybe in the bleaching step, of course it would have to be a much higher dilution than I did. I just didn't want to go too far with it right away and, you know, lose it all. And I might change the idea of maybe not toning it as long to see what would happen. So maybe instead of 2 hours, if I would tone it for 1 hour, maybe making a stronger concentration of coffee or tea. And then I think the last thing I would probably think of looking into would be maybe not leaving so much time in between before I sensitize the paper. So there are variables here that I can tweak around and see if I can get a better rendition, better results, more consistent results. But all in all, I don't think it went that bad. And if you found this interesting, or if you decide to try it, let me know. I'd like to know how you went about the workflow. I'd love to see your results. I am actually already today started to try it out with coffee, seeing if maybe coffee might be a little bit easier on the staining. I stained 2 sheets of Fabriano paper, one hot press, one cold press in coffee. I am going to follow the same exact things that I did just to see from what I've done, will coffee react better? Will there be a difference? Maybe, maybe not, but you'll never know until you try it, right? So I am going to leave you here and I will come back with a follow-up video on this experiment.